Right now, I just gotta ask this one question. What the hell were they thinking? Seriously, whoever thought this was a good idea should be drug out to the street and shot. The reality we had beforehand, even though difficult, we would have survived a whole lot easier in that sort of hellscape. But now, holy shit, just wow. We are so deep trouble. I remember when it all started. Those stupid brush fire wars we had, three, four, five of them around the frickin' world. And of course, it all came down to nobody wanted to lose, so of course some idiot launched a nuke somewhere, and then suddenly everybody had to launch the frickin' nukes. Thankfully, most of them they disabled, simply aborted the launch, but it was too late in some cases, and now radiation was spreading across the planet. So much so that pretty soon all the farmland would be irradiated, and there was no way they'd be able to grow enough food in their vertical farms to be able to do anything. Not to mention, the biofilters weren't strong enough to filter all that out. On top of that, it was known that the supervolcanoes were about ready to blow thanks to some moron hitting one of the tectonic plates with one of these damn explosives, causing it to flip. Once it released the pressure from the Cascadia fault line, yeah, sure, we lost 3 cities. Okay, big deal for a planet. But come on, releasing the pressure around the caldera? Now we're in trouble. And thanks to that one rumbling and tumbling, all the other supervolcanoes started acting the same way. Many of us figured that we would have to wait for some sort of explosion from the sun to cause this sort of explosion from the planet. But nope, we humans have a wonderful ability of fucking everything up. I think back now at that movie, back when there were such things, where they said it is in the nature to destroy ourselves. Maybe they were closer to the point than we realized. Although what they did afterwards just blew my mind. I still have trouble wrapping my brain around the quantum physics required for something like this. Instead of trying to fix the planet, they realized what they could do is harness enough energy, just enough to alter reality itself. This would do many things. It would change the ecology of the planet. It would adjust all those on the planet ever so slightly. In positive ways, actually, we found out, as in we don't actually age past a certain age. For men, it's the age of 25. For women, it's the age of 21. And this was a bonus for everyone. However, those of us who were older did not like the side effect, the amount of pain that our bodies had to go through. Oh, Lord, I do not ever want to relive that ever again, as it brought us back to where we were, breaking down all the different cells in our bodies. I mean, granted, there's no such thing as even the common cold anymore, but holy crap. It was bad enough that most of us were getting ready to die from the fact that half the bacteria in our bodies have been completely and totally annihilated. And some of those we need, despite what most people think. Ugh. Waking up in that reality after screaming myself into a slumber was not any sort of fun. We found out really quick that they needed a special type of key to activate that certain machine. They needed something to change the ecology of the planet, change everything around us so that we could actually survive. But what they needed was a child. A child's brain, being as malleable as it is, was the only thing they had an option for. And since they did show the child all these different nature documentaries, they figured the changes would be minor. However, what they didn't realize is that the child was a major fan of some god awful card game and a cartoon I couldn't stomach to watch, even with my nephew. I just couldn't do it. Hell, watching that with him, I remembered when I was a kid watching cartoons, and my own father couldn't stomach the crap I was watching back then, and I can't even watch it now, as if it was still around. But everything changed. When they activated that freaking machine, it let out some sort of wave that ran around our planet and wrapped it almost like a blanket, using the same type of energy that was coming off the sun to increase its viability. It began to pump down as the aurora borealis began to spread from the northern and southern poles, wrapping around the planet. It was beautiful to watch, but you didn't want to watch it too long, as it might damage your eyes. At least that's what we thought. We didn't know. I still remember sitting in the basement wondering, is this going to be my final breath? I wonder what's going to happen. Are we going to be saved, or is this some sort of BS where they're trying to take out 98% of the population like they always wanted? What's going to happen? Although, at that point, I think it would have been nicer if they just ended us instantly at that moment. I woke up later after again screaming myself to death as the pain woke me up from a solid sleep, and there I was, thrashing on the floor of my basement. I could hear my father on the other side of the house, another floor away, screaming in pain as well. It was horrific. And then I finally got to my feet. I realized that my bones weren't cracking nearly as much as they used to. I thought that was a bonus. That was great. I felt a lot more energy, even though I was a bit depleted. Running upstairs, I immediately grabbed a hold of whatever I could to drink it down because I needed fluids. I needed nutrition in my system. To my absolute shock, even though I hadn't looked into a mirror, someone turned the corner, and I thought it was my brother. But it wasn't. It was my dad. He looked ragged as hell, but he also looked younger than me. He looked at me, and we both were shocked at what we were looking at. He told me that I looked young. I ran straight to the bathroom to look into the mirror to see what was going on, and sure enough, I was younger again. Looking up, I could see that all the blemish marks, all the scars were gone. I pulled up my shirt. My surgery scars were gone. What the hell? Not that I'm complaining, but this was great. I checked myself over from the soles of my feet to the top of my head. It was great. I went back, I looked at my dad, and he was surprised. He even started, his hair was growing back, full, thick, like it used to be. What the fuck was going on? We couldn't figure out what was going on at all until we looked outside and saw that the trees looked different. The topography looked different. Something was off. Our backyard wasn't on the side of a hill anymore. No, it was much flatter. The backyard towards where the state land was used to be rugged, but no, now it was slow rolling hills. There was almost no outcroppings at all, no stones sticking out like normally is. What the hell was going on? And that's when we first saw one. It was some sort of creature. I couldn't understand what the hell I was seeing. Immediately running to the closet and hastily opening up the safe, pulling out my weapons and start loading them up, grabbing my gear and throwing it on, but realizing my gear had been changed. What the hell was this? This looks almost childish in design, but it's still my gear. The fuck? Is all I could think. As I continued to get ready, we watched as this thing just kind of moseyed its way across the backyard. It was the strangest looking creature I'd ever seen in my life. A strange quadrupedal something. It was almost like a child's creation made into a dog, although with kind of the face of a toad or something like that. It was strange. It was very odd. At that point, I had never put two and two together on this because I wasn't a fan of that show. Immediately, my dad was already asking for my phone as his phone didn't work. Damn thing must have been fried in the whole shift. Sure enough, I pulled out my phone and started going through the connecting pieces. Surprisingly, he could go through all the smartphone device because he could now see perfectly. He had perfect dexterity again. Okay, small bonuses, but what the hell? He started calling around to make sure everybody was okay, and sure enough, they were. But everybody was experiencing all different sorts of things. Nobody could make sense of it. Some of them, their houses were completely different. The layout was completely different. In one case, my niece had a different color hair. She wasn't that strawberry blonde anymore. No, her hair was almost like a pink, like a something you'd see out of the cartoons. And that is when it started to hit me. But it wasn't until we finally called my youngest sister and his son was actually screaming in hysterics. He was so happy at what he saw. He was amazed at what was actually walking outside of their doors as well. And he told me what they were. And my only response was, Oh, shit. And I thought the lions and tigers and bears, oh my, was the worst that we had to deal with. But now we had to deal with something far, far worse. He wanted to go out and play with them. I told him, don't you even think about it. I immediately started getting on a group call with everybody and told them all to stay away from them. And then when they asked why, I asked my nephew simply, how dangerous are these things? And before he could even answer, we could hear screaming from the neighbors. I rushed over to see what was going on, running out to the porch and realizing that one of these little lizards, seemingly with a fire sticking out its ass the whole time, had just torched the neighbor. Not only that, but set their entire house on fire. It was still sitting there pumping out a small burst of fire as it burned the man down to ashes. The creature didn't seem to aim at the house. It was just a secondary as the flame bypassed the body. And we watched in horror as this thing just burned down a $3 million house with no effort. It seemed to not even care. As soon as it was done killing the man, it simply strode off, not giving a crap about anything. I looked over at the neighbor's pond, and sure enough, there was some sort of strange giant carps jumping up and down, shooting different types of water all different ways. What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? We just explained what had happened over the phone to everybody, and they started saying how there was all that sort of thing happening everywhere. They were watching the news, and everything was just all about these creatures causing all sorts of damage. They were coming into the cities. Anybody's pets that had changed into something else, maybe a giant turtle with a water cannon with spraying enough water to cut through a cement wall, would easily cut the human body if you pissed it off. None of these things looked friendly. A few were seen on the TV running after this small little yellow rat. It was about the size of a large rabbit. And then they finally cornered it. And then the announcer said something I didn't think an announcer would say. He screamed for those people to get away from it. But one of them said something about having to catch this one and all the rest of them right before this yellow rat shot electricity strong enough that you could see it. That's beyond what we as humans can see. But it shot a piece of lightning out, connecting with the one closest to it. Immediately, the voltage that came out went right through the young man's arm, right down his leg, and the voltage actually exploded his foot off the body. But that didn't matter. The amperage was enough to kill him instantly. It was insane to see this. With that, I told everybody to grab all their shit and get to my house where I had the most supplies, but they need to clean out everything in the fridge and the freezer and bring it over. The only one that didn't listen was the eldest sibling. He realized that he had a good location. He was pretty far away from everybody else, and he had some weapons, and he was actually a better shot than me. At least he thought so. What he didn't know is I would whiff my shots just to, pad his ego, because he's not a fun person to be around when he loses. All in all, they finally got here. We bunkered in, and I've been using the long guns to try and keep these things at bay. It was horrifying to see what had happened throughout the cities. Millions were being killed by either water sprayed so fast that would take parts of them off, fire so hot that it would melt the body itself so much that in one case, if you ran it in slow motion, you could see the man's eyes explode inside his head from the heat. Another one seemed to use some sort of ability to lift rocks. Other ones had tendrils that would snap you in half, but that was the nice ones. The worst ones were seen that could simply look at you and cause you to do stupid things, walking into traffic, impale yourself on some sort of blade. It seemed as though they could take over your mind, or they could use telekinesis to simply toss you around like a rag doll, not even using their hands. And killing humans seemed to be an afterthought for these things. That is when we realized how much danger we were truly in. These creatures may look cute, but they are true nightmare fuel in reality. For the past several months, we've been doing nothing but hunting these things. We go out, and since they are the only form of protein, since all my chickens turned into different things and then rip themselves right out of the coop using their new abilities, sometimes killing each other in the process. But that's not enough. Though there's plenty to forage, as most, if not all, of the trees that are now around produce some sort of fruit at some time of the year, even in the middle of the winter. So, of course, life's little bonuses. Scavenging for whatever we can that wasn't altered, new root crops. Everything needs to be relearned, new ecology needs to be done. Every old farming tactic can be thrown out the window, and most of those multi-million-dollar pieces of machinery are now useless. Humanity has been left with one option. If they do not want to die, they must fight. And they must fight against these creatures that seem to enjoy hunting people down. Many of them will hunt them down and then simply use their ability to use fire to cook the humans and then eat them. The first time I had to deal with one of these, I was walking out towards the back, making sure we had enough firewood, and one of these things was sleeping in it. This thing, whatever in the hell it was, seemed to have giant spikes on its legs and immediately came towards me, trying to impale me. Pulling out my shotgun, I blasted it right in the face, and thankfully, the double-aught buckshot went clean through and cracked its cranium open like a croissant. As it bled out, I pulled out my knife to see what I could get off of this thing. To my surprise, whatever wasn't rock hard was very easy to cut into. At least we won't be starving. But around the world, the same things take place. Those in areas that cannot be easily defended have been wiped clean by these creatures. These creatures that don't seem to do anything but what a regular animal does. In some cases, we watch small groups seem to chant their little calls to each other. They seem to have a modicum of intelligence, although it is limited. The one that truly, truly frightened me. I was sitting on top of the hill in my archery hunting clothes because, let's face it, who gives a shit about hunting laws if over 50% of the population is now dead? I sat there watching, and I saw something I thought was a dream. There was what seemed like a woman in a white and green dress walking its way across. It was pretty. This thing was not very filled out. It looked like a very young woman, not very developed, but definitely tall. I pulled up my rifle, popped the tops off the scope, and that's when I got a very good look at it, and this thing was not human. I had one in the chamber, but I wondered if I could actually fire on this thing. Could I take it down? Just as I reached up with my thumb to pull the hammer back, it turned and looked right at me. I froze. I was so scared I almost pissed my pants at that moment. It looked at me as though it knew what I was going to do, as though it could feel the intention in my eyes. It looked around a little bit to my left and right. I still had my thumb on the hammer. I hadn't pulled it back yet. And that's when I heard something rustling behind me. I slowly, ever so slowly, turned my head as my ghillie suit was able to hide most of me. And then there was another sort of six-legged, sycophantic son of a bitch right behind me. I was so afraid at that point. I knew this one. This one could impale me very, very easily, as we humans are now extremely soft and squishy compared to everything around us. It seemed to walk right past me, and then it seemed to get ready to charge at this woman? This thing that was standing there gracefully seemed to not really have a care in the world, and then suddenly got concerned as it once again could feel killing intent. I motioned ever so slightly with my eyes, trying to get its attention, telling it to run, because this thing, it could kill us both without even thinking. It seemed to look up at me as I was still sitting there against the tree with my weapon up, the scope still aimed right at her head, and I could see that she was motioning with her eyes for me to do something. I didn't have a choice. I knew what I had to do. Pulling back the thumb ever so slowly, I hoped the click wouldn't let this thing know where I was. When the hammer was fully back, it gave the slight click as it went into place, and the thing, not more than an arm's length away, moved around to see where I was. It seemed to sniff the air a little bit, wondering what was going on. It then lost interest and focused as it started to move further down the hill towards the young woman in the white dress. I then began to move slowly, very slowly, and aimed at this six-legged creature. That's when I saw it. It wasn't alone. There was another one on the other side of the female. I turned the weapon again back to where I was. The female seemed to look at me, and I think it was female in a dress. It looked at me with concern. What was I doing? And then I raised the weapon ever so slightly up. I saw this thing. It was about ready to pounce on her. Bang! I let it go, and I saw the explosion of its head. Immediately turning, cocking the lever, I turned and fired again right into the one next to me. It didn't even realize I was there. By the time it turned, it was barely 10 feet from the muzzle of the rifle, and I put a bullet right through its jaw. It squealed on the ground. I got up, chambered another round, and started firing over and over and over right into its exposed underbelly as it flashed around, trying desperately to hide from the pain. But the final bullet was enough as I put it right into the base of its skull from its jawline. It just went limp. I looked over, and it was gone. Whatever it was in the long white dress was gone. I didn't have time to worry about it. I knew this much noise would be attracting some sort of predator, some sort of scavenger, so immediately I pulled out my knife after I reloaded my rifle and I got to work. I knew I had to get as much off of this thing as possible and get the hell out of there. And as I finally was able to cut off large pieces and throw them into my pack, I began to cinch it up, and just as I threw it onto my shoulder and started to walk, a hand touched my shoulder, and I froze. I looked at this strange-looking hand that was almost akin to a flipper, and I realized what the ever-loving shit was right next to me. I started to shake as the adrenaline spiked. I knew that this particular type of creature, if it wanted to, it could kill me with a thought, especially at this distance. To my absolute shock, it simply said, "Thank you." And then the hand got off my shoulder as I stood there, still as a statue. As I believed I heard it walking away, I began to walk forward, trying to find the quickest route back to the house. I turned as I got to the base of the hill and saw it standing over there in that flowing white dress, and I wondered, was this an angel or a demon? It didn't matter. I wanted to get the hell out of there, because as I walked, I could hear others coming, and these ones were nasty. I could smell the smoke as some of them spit fire. I could smell the water in the air. I could taste it almost as some of them sprayed at each other, trying to keep each other back from the kill itself. These creatures, these deadly monstrosities, were so dangerous. I did not want to be around them. And then, Holy hell, another one flew in, this one dragging flame behind it, and it crashed and roared. And I said, fuck all that, and I ran. I ran as fast as I could over the next hill, down the next gulch, through the river. I didn't even care to use the bridge. I just kept on going as fast as I possibly could. When I got back, of course, we had a meal, and I told them what happened. My nephew was there, and he was explaining the pluses of all these creatures as he had played the card game and he had watched the god awful cartoon, and I did not, so I was not sure about the rest of them. He was surprised that I had taken down one of those multi-leg freaks. I was just glad that I was still breathing. But then when I told him about the flying one, he got nervous. And when the subject matter expert gets nervous, that's when we all need to be afraid.